what would we do if we didn't have a second day of Rosh Hashanah? We would miss out the shofar completely. We spoke this morning at the 8:30 class about not having shofar on Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, and maybe some places they did in the temple, they did in other places. Maybe there were other communities where they had that as well. So we have to think about exactly how to understand. We have to understand what we're supposed to do with the second day of Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah falling on Shabbos means, what do we do when we don't have a shofar? So I could tell you what some people do when they don't have shofar on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. What do some people do when they don't have shofar on the first day of Rosh Hashanah? That's right. Bob is saying it. They stay home. Interestingly, and this is something that I'm sure it would surprise you, and it's probably not necessarily accurate because I'm still trying to figure it out. Surprisingly, some of the services at KJ this year have more people the first day than the second day. And so I'm wondering if some of them haven't yet figured out that the first day of Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos. So they think they're just going to come the first day. Because the reality is, in many synagogues, the first day of Rosh Hashanah has more people than the second, because people get it out of their system early. But the first day of Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, you have to come the second day for shofar. So maybe some of these people haven't yet figured out how this year is different from other years. But not having the shofar on Shabbos this year gives us an opportunity to think about Rosh Hashanah and think about judgment in a different way. It removes the main symbol of the day from the liturgy. It removes that wake-up call. Maimonides famously describes the shofar as a kind of spiritual alarm clock, as if the shofar is saying, Uru yeshenim mishinatchem, wake up sleepyheads, and start the new year off right. Well, some people have the internal alarm clock and don't need the external to wake them up. They have that pop. They wake up at a certain time every morning or when they want to wake themselves up. That's not me. Although I am thinking about of a Seinfeld episode where Kramer claims to have one and sets it and it doesn't work, and he says he must have hit the snooze button now on his internal alarm clock. But the Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos requires us to wake ourselves up. What are we going to do to wake ourselves up? And in particular, and this is a theme I come back to every time Rosh Hashanah, first day of Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos. In the liturgy, we add some of the Shabbos passages into the High Holiday liturgy, into the Rosh Hashanah prayers. And so we add the passages that we would usually say in the Shabbat Musaf into Rosh Hashanah's Musaf. And one of them is Yismechu v'malchutcha. We say it every Shabbos. Yismechu v'malchutcha shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg. Rejoice in your kingship. Rosh Hashanah is very much about God as king, and we're rejoicing in God's kingship. That's what we're celebrating. We celebrate God being in charge, and part of God being in charge involves, practically speaking, we're not blowing the shofar in Rosh Hashanah. In a sense, the first day of Rosh Hashanah falling on Shabbos is an opportunity to recognize that we engage with the high holidays. We engage with Rosh Hashanah by doing God's will, regardless of whether or not we listen to the shofar. It's God's will being done, which is at the core of what we're thinking about on Rosh Hashanah. And shofar or no shofar. So first day of Rosh Hashanah falling on Shabbos is an opportunity to focus, to divert our focus from, Rosh Hashanah. We think, first associations with Rosh Hashanah, definitely shofar is high up there. This was Family Feud, top 5 answers on the board. Shofar, definitely. Round challah, honey, apple. These are some other themes on the side, not really the subject of our talk tonight. That too will be in the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday sessions of the 8:30 morning Zoom. But the idea of shofar, no shofar when first day of Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos, allows us to pivot from the familiar and to also focus on the essential. There is a Hasidic teaching of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, the famed Hasidic Rebbe, who's known as the great defender of the Jews, who points out that God judges on the first day, the people on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. That's really the one that counts most. And if the first day of Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos, the only judgment that God can write on Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos is for life. Because on Shabbos, even God's not allowed to write except for pikuach nefesh purposes, to save a life. So when the first day of Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos, we start off in a better position, because the only judgment that can be offered on the first day of Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos is for life. And so, leaving aside all the anthropomorphic questions that this raises, but the idea is that first day of Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, when there's no shofar, allows us to expand our horizons for what we're focused on in terms of what Rosh Hashanah is all about, and to recognize that some of the things that we're used to most about Rosh Hashanah need not define Rosh Hashanah. And that in particular is relevant this year, because some of the things that we are most familiar with on Rosh Hashanah will not be as readily available. And here we can talk more specifically about some of the changes to our high holiday season that are emerging because of COVID. And in particular, one of the things that's foremost on our minds this holiday season, as it was for Shavuos, as it was for Pesach, it's been on our minds since March, is health and well-being and safety, and doing whatever is necessary to ensure the health and well-being and safety of ourselves and protecting others and the like. And this is part of the messaging that I'm sure you have seen from KJ and other synagogues, and everyone is focused on how do we keep people safe. Well, the hard answer is that we can't guarantee people's safety and security. We can do what we can to mitigate risk. We can create an environment where we can keep people as safe as we think we possibly can. And hopefully that fits into some people's risk tolerance and how they manage the risk. And that's how we go forward. And so for some people, that fits in very well. Some people are itching to get back to shul, to attend services as much as possible and engage in the familiar parts of Rosh Hashanah. And for other people, it doesn't fit so well. Could be people who are older, people who have health issues, people who live with people who are older who have health issues. Then that requires them to think maybe it doesn't work for the way they want to manage the risk. It's something that's very much on the front burner for all of us who are working with programming this high holiday season. In some parts of the Orthodox community, the infection rate is going up. Kids are in school. People are coming back together in different ways. There's more risk that's out there, and how that impacts how we're going to celebrate the holiday guides our decision. And I think that whatever decision is taken, if it's to maintain health and well-being, it's the right decision. If it's following the protocols of a synagogue and attending the services, whether it be a prayer service indoors or outdoors or hearing shofar, that's great. If it means avoiding the holiday services or even shofar completely in order to remain as safe as a person feels they need to be, that's also okay. Because one of as we started off with, the Rosh Hashanah should really be about reinforcing priorities. Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos, no shofar. Definitely, clearly, Rosh Hashanah is about something more than the symbols. It's about life. It's about ensuring that we have the best possible new year. God is in control, and that's certainly something we've learned these last 6 months. We don't control things, but we'll do whatever we can to make the year as positive as possible. And that, so recognizing that some of the things that we're used to, we won't encounter on this Rosh Hashanah because of COVID is clearly something that to keep in mind, and that will impact our services. Many services at KJ are not necessarily at the usual time, and they're certainly much shorter. The popular prayer poems and the familiar melodies will not be heard the same way, if at all. When discussing the holidays this year, there's specific attention as to things may be familiar and things may be popular, but that doesn't mean that it has to be done. So, if I would ask people who are Zooming in here this evening, what is the prayer that you're most familiar with? So some people will say the Unisana Tokef prayer, the prayer where we say, in repentance, prayer, and charity can remove the evil of the decree. That's very, it has some very haunting melodies, right? We say Baruch Hashanah Yikatehevun V'Yom Tzom Kippur Yechatehevun. we're gonna take that out of the service. Technically, it doesn't have to be part of the service. These types of religious prayer poems are not integral parts of the service. They have become part of the service, and now's not necessarily the time to explore that. We explore that as part of our liturgy and prayer exploration in the mornings, but you don't need it there. It's nice, it adds to the service. You don't need it there. Sometimes some prayers don't necessarily have to be recited. Question came up about how come we don't say Avinu Malkeinu on Shabbat? That's also a very popular prayer. Avinu Malkeinu Chaneinu Vaneinu. Right, we don't say it on Shabbos. There, the rule is that Avinu Malkeinu is a very petitionary prayer. We're beseeching God, our Father, our King, for many things. Those types of prayers are not recited on Shabbat. That's the way it works. The whole focus of Shabbat is on the day itself and not on the petitioning for forgiveness and for all the things in these 24 Avinu Malkeinus. So if it doesn't belong, if it's not appropriate to the day, we don't say it. So when it comes to trying to find the happy or unhappy medium between dealing with the dangers and mitigating the risk and having a service, then if it means we're more comfortable having a service by skipping things, then we do it. We leave them out, cut it out. Not forever. We realize that what we're trying to do is actually balance between the priority of what the day is about and what we're used to. The idea of coming together in prayer to start the new year has a very long tradition. It's been part of our Jewish experience since Rosh Hashanah was commanded as a holiday, and certainly throughout the entire rabbinic period. However, we're not able to do it all because to expand it as usual would mean spending more time than we necessarily feel comfortable. So we'll say what needs to be said and then call it a day. Now, this is going to get a lot of people very excited to hear that all of a sudden Rosh Hashanah can be done in 2.5 hours or less instead of 5 hours. It's like the story of the rabbi who gave a terrific fire and brimstone sermon. It took 30 minutes. And afterwards, one of his congregants who was in media said to him, Rabbi, I want to put that on as a special segment on the weeknight news, but 30 minutes is too long. Do you think you could distill the sermon into 2 minutes? The rabbi's thinking to himself, wow, I get my sermon on the news. Look at all that exposure. He says to the producer, definitely, I can make that happen. I can cut this message from 30 minutes to 2. So the guy said to him, so why didn't you in the first place? So, sometimes there's a reason to expand and there's a certain power for of the drama of the experience. But the danger involved in this year is definitely having us think twice about what is essential. And on some level, staying healthy is most essential. And if that means not davening in shul, then don't daven in shul. We can daven at home. And if it means modifying from what we're used to, then we modify. On some level, the ability to pray b'tzivur, to come together in a communal setting, even for the Shemona Esrei, or to hear the shofar within the text of the Musaf service, will cover the basics if we can. And if we can't, we'll find another way to go forward. It's definitely very much on people's minds. And I think that, some of you may have seen some of the resources that KJ has. We have the virtual synagogue resource, the Rosh Hashanah Reader, the KJ Beginner's Guide to the key prayers that are recited throughout the holiday of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. The danger is, on some level, forcing some of us, it's empowering some of us to find our own mechanism of prayer. What should we be saying and how should we be saying it? And I think that something that came that I spoke about in previous sessions, that definitely this pandemic has empowered us or given us the opportunity to take more responsibility for our own performance of our Judaism. Because here we are, we're responsible ourselves. We may not have the opportunity to be in shul. We may not have the rabbi announcing pages or providing introductions. That then becomes something that we're responsible to do. And that emerges from the danger and the distance that is emerging from this time, but it also allows us to refocus and prioritize ourselves as to what's important and what we want to be focused on. One of the things it also makes us acutely aware of when we're trying to avoid danger is what is dangerous. So for example, in terms of the prayer service, one of the variables that's being evaluated and adjusted as needed is the voice of the chazan or the rabbi or the Torah reader, or the sound that comes from the shofar, that comes from the breath of the person blowing shofar, which creates a certain mindfulness and awareness that we not necessarily always used to paying attention towards, and having that opportunity, to think about, okay, so what is that, what, even though a lot of what's been studied hasn't really given us a lot of concrete data points as to the danger that's involved with speaking and singing and shofar blowing, but all of a sudden you see consideration of putting a mask on the end of a shofar, and maybe that's how we mitigate the risk in that case, or a cantor being masked, or the cantor or Torah reader not wearing a mask if they're all the way in the front and separated from other people. There are a lot of considerations that emerge from this mitigating the risk. And then I think in particular the social distancing, whether it be the way the chairs are set up in the synagogue. How is this Rosh Hashanah different from other Rosh Hashanahs? Is this high holiday season different from others? It's the fact that people are apart more than usual. On the one hand, this actually may work out better to limit talking in shul. That could be something, between the mask and the 6 feet, you really got to scream if you want to get heard when talking in shul. But it is creating a new awareness and certain changes in how, for example, we call aliyos to the Torah. Or, for example, the fact that we create opportunities for multiple shifts during the day of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. At KJ, we're not even fully done yet figuring out how many are going to be necessary based on seating capacities and the like. But and what parts of the service become the critical ones to start at? Do you start with the shachar reading? Do you start with the Torah reading? Or do you start with the shofar blowing? And also the timing of things. Some of you who may have had the courage to fill out the KJ service form for all the different options and slots, notice that there was on Yom Kippur, there was a regular time for Mariv and a late time for Mariv. So instead of going right when you're used to when saying Kol Nidre, instead you're going an hour and a half later. Or you may have noticed that there's an early Ne'ilah. The early Ne'ilah has to come with the caveat that you can't break your fast any earlier. You just daven Ne'ilah earlier, and the Yom Kippur still ends at 7:19 when Yom Kippur ends. But it's given us a lot of food for thought. Certainly food for thought for Rosh Hashanah. It's not food for thought when it comes to Yom Kippur, but it's food for thought in general of how we look at and how we schedule and how we arrange ourselves and how we place ourselves and how we position ourselves with regards to the holiday, whether it be the liturgy, whether it be the rituals, or whether it be ourselves. Clearly being there in person or not wanting to be there in person has also created a continued exploration of the Zoom phenomenon and the live stream phenomenon. A number of you may have participated in every night Slichot, which, similar to our Tisha B'Av commemoration, are opportunities where the congregation can participate as fully as possible at home as they could being in person for the most part. Because it's not a Shabbat or a holiday, it's a weeknight, it's Saturday night, and the individual's response to the public prayer is okay. And this is not the mourner saying Kaddish along with a Zoom minyan, which is something we spoke about months ago. But here it is hearing a certain prayer expressed and being able to respond when hearing it on Zoom. And as opposed to the whole discussion of a Zoom Seder or a Zoom Shabbos service, when halacha does not permit that type of use of technology because of the laws of Shabbat, here it's Saturday night. So, most of the rules are off when it comes to this type of commemoration. And just like with Tisha B'Av, where the only reading of Eicha and the religious passages of the keynote were done on Zoom, you wonder, maybe this works out pretty well. Maybe there are more people saying Slichot on Saturday night on Zoom than there would have been there in person. And as much as we profess the desire that next year we'll be together in person, I wonder whether next year more people will also like to hear Cantor Burson recite Slichot live from the comfort of their living rooms. There's a whole thing with Zoom etiquette, whether or not, how, you're supposed to dress and your background, and, whether or not people are wearing pants when there's a Zoom being presented or not. Who knows? Here you are, you're in Slichot, and the way some of these are done, you're not even, your face, some of your faces are here. It's nice to see you. On the live stream, you're not even there. You're just watching everything. In case you were watching on Saturday night, we had just a minyan in the sanctuary. Cantor Burson, 6 singers, Rabbi Steinmetz and me, and the person manning the camera was someone who was Jewish. So we had our minyan in the room. And when the moments where you're supposed to open the ark, we opened the ark. And so it was a regular service, just very small in a very big space, but you're not there. We're coming up on it as we move forward into the high holidays. We have the Slichot services every morning. You can zoom into the KJ service and hear Rabbi Lookstein lead them the next couple of weeks, please God. On Erev Rosh Hashanah, there's what we have, the Hatarat Nedarim, the annulment of vows. Now, the whole annulment of vows is a topic larger than this. If you see the KJ High Holiday Reader, there are a couple of articles there about it. If you have the ability to annul the vows, then it may not, it's sort of having this out may not stop you from taking them in the first place. But we have this idea of annulling the vows. It's a big deal. In this community in particular, the idea of this Chor Brit Slichos, this Erev Rosh Hashanah Slichos that were classically led by Rabbi Joseph Lookstein and now by Rabbi Haskell Lookstein, for decades, is an event. And I remember growing up and people would go to Slichos and the same crowd would go each of the days of Slichos. Here at KJ, Erev Rosh Hashanah, in a year when people are coming to Shul more often, it's a big deal. You have many, many more people. Usually you can set up 20, 30 Slichos books. On Erev Rosh Hashanah, you need 2 or 3 times that many, and people still come because they want the Hataras Nedarim afterwards. What happens when you can't be in person? Well, maybe Zoom does the job. And in fact, Rabbi Herschel Schachter of Yeshiva University has said that if the 3 rabbis are in the same place, serving as a Beit Din, as the rabbinical court, to then oversee the annulment of the vows, and they have a list of everyone who's participating. So though, like for example, Zoom, you can see who all the participants are. Hataras Nedarim works, right? Hataras Nedarim, Zoom doesn't work for a rabbi to officiate at a wedding or witnesses to watch the Jewish marriage, but here on Zoom, we have that opportunity. So we have how this high holiday season is different. Well, our response to the danger and how we prioritize health and wellness and how that changes our approach to the holiday and our liturgy of the holiday. Our being distant also impacts that as well in terms of the order of a service, the parts of the service, and how we make up for not being in person and utilizing Zoom as a mechanism for engagement. I think the social distancing has another answer to the question of how is this high holidays different than the others. And that is the fact that we don't have the same ability to have the interaction with others around the holiday table, whether it be the families not coming together the same way, the parents and children and other family members or grandchildren and grandparents, especially as the elderly are far greater risk. And I think that there's certainly an element of this high holiday season, that social distancing that diminishes the experience of the holiday, and Rosh Hashanah in particular. I think if you look at the Jewish holiday calendar for when are those moments of family togetherness most pronounced, the Seder is one, and Rosh Hashanah is number 2. You certainly can tell this by the brisket sales, and how the recipes always appear. Some would say the break fast, but I think the break fast is more of a H&H Zabar's creation, or the Russin daughters, than it is a real thing. But we noted, and this is something from programmatically speaking, in our beginners program, we have Friday night dinners and Shabbat across America, and we instituted a Rosh Hashanah dinner when I got here, as recognizing that it wasn't a large event or a social event, but it was for people who just didn't have access to their families for Rosh Hashanah. Similar to the Seder, although for the Seder, even more people found their way to their families, and the Seder was had a different type of a vibe, either people who weren't near their families or just were not familiar running their own. But Rosh Hashanah and Pesach, these are the times when you get together as a family. And this year, you don't have that same opportunity. And just like the Zoom was utilized for the Seder, especially the components of the Seder, because the Seder is also an exploration, an explanation, and there's teaching and there's singing. I think that, Rosh Hashanah, with people not having that Rosh Hashanah dinner moment with family in a social environment as usual, requires us to think about how do we replicate that type of a connection, whether it be before the holiday, whether it be finding, certainly the other buzzword of the pandemic besides Zoom is drive-by. Some of the lingo of the pandemic, Zoom, drive-by, contactless, right? These are all terms that we use a lot more than we ever did before. But finding the mechanism of finding the way that we're able to connect with other people and being more mindful of it, because it's not going to happen as automatically the same way as Rosh Hashanah dinner is the time when the family will get together. It requires us to be a little bit more proactive in finding these opportunities. In addition, I think it's also the opportunity it forces us to be more mindful of opportunities to connect and help other people. And one of the things that came to me one morning as we restarted Minyan at KJ is that usually at the services, we pass around a basket to collect tzedakah. And that's not happening because of contact and social distancing and wanting to maintain distance and everything. On some level, a regular opportunity for chesed and tzedakah is missing. And in fact, I noted that the synagogue received a donation for someone, and in the memo of the donation was to replace the amount of money I usually put in the basket between March and September. The idea of being mindful of chesed, and I think one of the things, and it's come up before in community conversations, has been the incredible acts of kindness that have been done of people delivering food for other people or helping other people, or in all sorts of appropriate mask wearing, socially distant ways. But when you're not walking amongst the people, it requires the social distancing requires us to be more mindful and thoughtful as to how we can help other people. And I think a final component of this social distance changes to the high holiday experience. And it's not just the high holiday experience, but the high holiday experience is one where we put there's a lot of emphasis and discussion about the relationship with God and the relationship with other people. And especially with regards to Yom Kippur, we talk about Yom Kippur as our chance to correct our relationship with God, but we still have the responsibility to correct our relationship with other people directly. There's a third category, and that's our relationship with ourselves. In Hebrew, we have Ben Adam LaMakom, between man and God. We have Ben Adam LaChavero, between man and his fellow. And we also have Ben Adam LaAtzmo, the way a person relates to themselves. The fact that we need to give some thought to our own mental health and how we are reacting and relating to what it means to be apart from people that we love and care about, that we're used to seeing. And having that, this gets back to what I was saying before, but what do you do with all that spare time on Yom Kippur when you're not in shul? And what do you do, the way the timing works out, you may end up with, from 11 to 5 p.m. with nothing to do. So what are you going to do with those 6 hours? That might be a lot of time to spend thinking about yourself and your mindfulness and the like. But we have an opportunity to give some thought as to who am I and what I'm all about. And I think that's something. For further information, you can check the virtual synagogue experience. I have a high holiday sermon on the subject, but it's really the chance to think about who am I and what I'm about, especially when very often, just like we started off by saying, we're used to a certain experience on the high holidays. We're used to a certain way of doing things. We're used to certain actions. We're used to certain rituals. We're used to certain experiences. Well, we don't have those. So what do we have? And instead of looking at it as having to settle, look at this as, well, it's pivoting and expressing who we are and what's important in different ways. It really, from the very first difference in how this high holidays is different than the others. Well, Rosh Hashanah starts off on Shabbos, which changes our whole perspective and gives us a Rosh Hashanah without shofar, which causes us to think, so what's it really all about if it's not about shofar? And then the whole experience of recognizing that it's about optimizing ourselves, and that means taking the right precautions of safety and wellness and health and well-being of ourselves and others. And this will impact all sorts of ways of our liturgy and our own prayers and our shofar and our rituals. And it keeps us apart from people. When we're apart from people, we find ways of trying to bridge it. And that it works sometimes with some of our rituals on Zoom. And sometimes it doesn't, because we're not as connected with family and friends for the usual traditional holiday experiences. And maybe that alone time is an opportunity for us to think about the Bein Adam La'atzmo, who we are, which is really the foundation of our relationship with God and our relationship with other people. So, those are some differences. How is this night? How will these high holidays be different from all other high holidays? These are some areas that I've been thinking about and wanted to share. We'll save Sukkot for a pre-Sukkot conversation we'll have in a couple of weeks. A couple of questions that were coming in while we were speaking, and if people have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or to raise your hand and ask. Will there be any permanent changes to Jewish practice out of this time period? Look, I think communal practice, yes. The question asked about Zoom. Zoom, I think, or live streaming in general is a new phenomenon that a lot of the Jewish community will make more use of. I think one of my kids asked me, had we heard of Zoom beforehand? Now, kids have, because they've been using it for some type of distance learning, even within the school setting for a while. But the question of will it change the ritual going forward? In much of the Orthodox community, Orthodox community is conservative with a small c when it comes to changing ritual. A lot of the conversations and rabbinic discussion has been for this year only. So, for example, this year we can get rid of Unasana Token, but don't try and do that next year. We're not trying to cut the service down to 2.5 hours. No, you want to change the singing, you want to shorten the sermon, God forbid. These are all things you can think about doing. But when it comes to long-term changes, a lot of the Orthodox community would resist. I think that, and for some of the things that I mentioned before, some of those reasons, we believe in the value of coming together in person to create tzibur. There's probably a sociological and psychological benefit of being in person, not just seeing faces and interacting this way. And I think that the traditional Orthodox Jewish approach to to mitzvah and to obligation and to effort, right? We believe in what's called schar halicha. You get reward for walking, right? When your grandparents said they walked to school both hill in the snow, uphill both ways, right? You're supposed to work a little bit hard. Lefum Sara Agra is the mission in Pirkei Avot. According to the effort is the reward. So I think that a lot of Zoom and this type of interaction is viewed as too much of a shortcut. My perception is that the very first thing that was considered on Zoom was Megillah Esther, reading of Esther on Purim. And that was an initial a conversation. If people were told if you're at risk, etc., use Zoom. And I think that even as that view, which was widely accepted in the Orthodox community, started to make its way out, there was already buyer's remorse. There was some regret that it happened because, as I heard and others heard, that was great. I was sitting on the couch with my grandchildren, and we got to watch and listen to the Megillah. It's a little too easy. Now, I love it. If it enhances people's Judaism, it's great. That's a wonderful thing for more people to engage in more Judaism. At the same time, going to shul, Schar Halicha, has a certain place in our religious understanding as well. So I think things like that, they may gain a little bit of traction, but more broadly, I think they'll be resisted, and that we will still encourage as much in person as possible. I think the teaching will take place like this. I think certain types of meetings will take place like this. I think there'll be an interest in live streaming the services to make them more accessible. But here, in many ways, the Zoom is the ikar in this day and age of social distancing, while being in person is the tafel. In many ways, I personally believe if anyone has any doubt whatsoever about coming to shul, stay home. That's the mitzvah. And again, like I said at the beginning, it's about managing one's risk tolerance and how you handle it. Because look, we can set up protocols that we can't guarantee that someone who's asymptomatic with COVID isn't sitting next to you. You pass them in the hallway or be in the elevator with them. We just can't. We set up guidelines and a mechanism that we think 6 feet apart, everyone socially distant, minimal, keeping the flow of people in a certain way. That's how we do things. But I think that for now, best thing, if you're when in doubt, stay home. Absolutely. Everyone kept asking, can we ban people from coming to shul over 65? Should they stay home? I don't see anyone who's over 65 here. No one on my Zoom looks over 65. So, but the idea of, on some level, I think, yes, if there's a higher risk population, stay home. I'm not in that high risk population. And I recognize that for some people, staying away can be harmful spiritually, emotionally, and it's a longer conversation. But I think that once we, get back to coming, the emphasis will return to trying to do things in person. I think we'll still provide the opportunity because, if they can or won't, they may as well. But I think we're going to try to rehabilitate the in-person once again. For example, like the Hataras Nadarim is an interesting question. Do we, for something that's a little bit of a, it's a little bit of a fake anyway, should we, enhance the fake by faking it by doing it on Zoom type of a thing? Again, it's a larger conversation as to what is the exact halachic nature of annulling vows and how that works, and is that the same thing as kol nidre, and does it really work? And so I think that it's a long conversation of, I don't think I think that practice. There'll still be a lot of the same emphases. Implementing some of the opportunities to study and connect on Zoom, 100%, we will embrace, and people already are embracing. And that's where there'll be a change. Hearing the shofar on Zoom, is that a mitzvah of hearing the shofar? So the short answer is no, on two levels. One, because the mitzvah of shofar is on Yom Tov, and on Yom Tov we don't use Zoom. So that's that would be a problematic utilization of hearing the shofar. But even beyond that, the Talmud is very explicit that you have to actually hear the shofar. And the Talmud has a number of examples of people who hear just the echo of the shofar. And it gives the example of someone who's blowing the shofar into a cave or into a pit. And so, for example, blowing the shofar downwards into a pit where the people who might be on the bottom of the pit are hearing the shofar, but the people who are standing off to the side are hearing the echo of the shofar as it reverberates out of the pit. And the Talmud says that the people who hear the shofar fulfill the obligation, but not those who hear the echo. And even for those who want to allow listening to Zoom to fulfill a mitzvah, like the reading of the book of Esther, will say shofar doesn't work. because it's not the actual voice or sound of the shofar. So that's with regards to that issue. Any other questions or any other thoughts that people have of how this Rosh Hashanah is different from all the others? All right, so there's some food for thought. The one thing that should not change on this Rosh Hashanah and this high holiday season, that it should be one that is meaningful, one that has joy, one that has sweetness. And every single year we say, no matter the year, let the year with all of its difficulties end, and a new year that will be full of blessings emerge. And as I don't even remember who it was who told me this, that the best of 5780 should be the worst of 5781. And let's keep the bar going higher and higher and in that direction. So a Shana Tova to everybody. Again, plenty of learning opportunities in virtual